Wonderful. I am now the presenter. Wow, the power. Do you want to wait a few more minutes, or should we get started?
I think we should get started, and people can join in whenever they can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Kimberly Thompson, and I'm the National Director for Rainbows for All Children Canada. I know that a brief bio has been shared, and presenting today with me will be Helene Casey, who is one of our volunteers from the Calgary area, and I'll let her just give herself, give an introduction as well. Not to put you on the spot, Helene, but could. Can everyone hear Helene? No.
I don't know where I'm supposed to turn on the sound,
I'm not sure. I turned the sound on when I logged in. It gave me a chance to choose. Okay. So Helene has asked me to get started. Helene has been with Rainbows for a number of years, and she is running the program through the French Language Board in the Calgary area, and she recently helped us to expand the program into the French Language Board in Edmonton and in northern Alberta, including some of the communities, schools, around Fort McMurray. And so hopefully she'll be able to figure out sound soon, because she is our translator. Oh, I think you're there, Helene. I can hear you.
Yes,
Yay.
I am good now. Yes.
So welcome to everyone again for joining us. I'd really like to know who is attending today. So is it possible for you to let me know who you are and where you're calling from? Anybody go? Anybody go?
It's Kim calling from Greenwood.
Hi, Kim. Welcome.
Thank you.
Teresa from Borden.
Hello, Teresa. Just around the corner. Welcome.
Thank you.
Teresa at MFS.
Teresa at MFS. Thanks for joining us.
Melissa from Yellowknife.
Welcome, Melissa.
I'm Serge from Gagetown.
Welcome, Serge.
And there's a whole slew of us here with Serge.
How many are with Serge from Gagetown?
6 of us.
Oh, wonderful. Well, welcome to all of you.
Thank you. And there's 7 of us from Borden.
7 of you from Borden. Welcome. So it's Teresa plus crowd. I know we have Lynn from PEI. I've met Lynn already. Welcome, Lynn.
André Tivierge and Louise from DMFS Ottawa.
Welcome. I can't unmute myself, but it's Jen from US MFS. Welcome, Jen.
And Lisa, MFS in Ottawa as well.
Lisa, welcome. And I think we're okay. Did I get everybody? Is there anybody who's wanting to let us know? Well, there's 4 from MFRC Ottawa. Is there anybody I've missed? I can see that there's a message from Lisa in Halifax as well. Welcome. I'm trying to catch everybody just so that I have a really good idea where you're calling from, and it just makes it a little bit more personal while we're doing this webinar. So I'll move on. If there's anybody I've missed, please in the chat box, if you can let me know who you are. And it's not a test, it's really just for my own information so I can educate myself on who's on the call. Rainbows for All Children Canada, I'm not sure how much you know, so if I'm telling you things you already know, I apologize, but I'm hoping that this will be mostly new information for you. Rainbows is a national nonprofit organization that is responsible for supporting children through grief and loss, and I'm having some navigation issues. Come on.
Did you want to share? Did you want to pass me the ball so I can flip the pages for you?
Yeah, might as well because I'm having some hard time here.
No problem. My pleasure.
Thank you.
I can be your assistant.
Thank you. I have 2 assistants today. That's better than most days. So, so Rainbows is a national nonprofit organization responsible for looking out for children who have experienced a life-altering event or a loss, and helping support them in developing increased resiliency. And I'm already tripping over my tongue. You want to go to the next slide? Our organization has been around since 1994, and we have supported more than 150,000 children and youth and adults across the country. We currently have programs on the East Coast in New Brunswick, on the West Coast in BC, and we actually do have some programs that are run in Yellowknife as well. We're not in every community, but that's our goal, because really we want to try and reach as many children who are struggling through loss as possible. Right now we can say that we have programs in 600 communities with about 4,000 sites. Now that site number changes from year to year because the number of volunteers we have changes from year to year. So sometimes that's more and sometimes that's a little bit less. So we're about 800, on average, we're about 800 volunteers who help run Rainbows programs across the country. But Rainbows Canada is part of actually an international movement that was started in the US and is now in 17 countries. Spain, Australia has a very big presence, South Africa, England, Ireland, of course the US, I think Korea or Japan. So we really do have a large presence around the world, and we support about 3 million children across the planet. So this isn't just a little program. This is something that's been snowballing for a long time. Go ahead. So I often get asked why we do what we do. And I think that the statistics that are in front of you now are really the reason that we do what we do. And although they're not all applicable to your group and what we're talking about today, it does speak to the scope of what it is that Rainbows Canada does and how we can help families. I found that it was fairly interesting that 1 in 20 children would experience the loss of someone significantly close to them before they graduated high school. That's a lot of Canadian children. And I don't need to tell you folks, 64,000 children who live in military families where change is a constant. But I think the other stat that can affect anyone in any community on this sheet that's very overwhelming is that 73,000 children die every year. 83% of those have surviving siblings. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges that Rainbow's children face? So I will, if it's all right with Hélène, I will give an explanation here, and then I will let Hélène communicate the same in French, if that works for everyone.
Problem.
Fantastic. Can you send to the next slide for me? So A lot of children face theories within our general public that kind of impede or don't support their journey through loss. One of those is that adults don't often identify that they're actually grieving. You know, there's a family who's struggling and one child is really having trouble and it's very plain in their behavior, and maybe another child seems to be adapting really well. And that doesn't mean that that child's not grieving or that child's not struggling. It's just not outwardly observable. But they are still dealing with loss, and they may still need some support. Children who've experienced a loss can heal. Well, of course they can. But sometimes they need a little help, like we all need a little help when things get challenging. Children don't know how to grieve, and that's this theory that children don't know how to grieve. Well, nobody knows how to grieve. It's really about the support that they get at the time. And then children don't distinguish the difference between a loss for a death or a loss for a divorce or separation. So those are some of the things that we like to address as part of our Rainbows programs, not directly, but indirectly, by giving them the tools to deal with some of these commonplace theories. Do you want to explain that, Hélène?
Yes.
Thank you.
Alors, ce que Kimberly veut dire, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup de défis à reconnaître les signes pour les adultes face aux enfants qui ont des situations de deuil. Parfois, les adultes ne reconnaissent pas vraiment quels sont ces signes, surtout dans les communautés scolaires ou même dans la communauté en général. On a une population vieillissante qui a d'autres idées aussi sur le deuil, mais en même temps, on a une nouvelle génération où est-ce qu'il faut être capable d'aider à reconnaître ces signes. Les enfants vivent les deuils et vivent les pertes comme les adultes, mais les signes et les façons de l'exprimer sont différents. Il y a des enfants qui peuvent être très bien adaptés à l'école ou même quand ils sont en train de jouer dans les activités parascolaires ou après l'école. Et puis, on pense qu'ils vont bien, puis finalement, c'est des enfants qui vivent peut-être des grands deuils ou des grandes pertes. Alors, il faut être quand même, avoir l'œil entraîné pour être capable de reconnaître ces défis. Et il y a d'autres enfants qui peuvent être très agités ou très surexcités. Et ça aussi, ça peut être des signes, justement, à reconnaître. Les enfants ne savent pas nécessairement comment vivre un deuil, comment être capable de passer au travers et ensuite ces conséquences-là peuvent être très dommageables plus tard dans leur vie. Alors, c'est pour ça qu'il faut être capable, comme adulte, d'être la ligne guidante pour les aider avec ça, puis aussi être la ligne guidante pour les parents qui les accompagnent, ces enfants, ou les adultes responsables autour de ces enfants-là. Un enfant peut avoir de la difficulté à reconnaître le mal d'une grande perte et aussi le mal d'un divorce ou d'une séparation parce que c'est pas la même chose. Alors, les blessures sont pas les mêmes, les manifestations chez l'enfant ne seront pas les mêmes non plus et ils ne peuvent pas reconnaître ça parce qu'ils n'ont pas encore la maturité émotionnelle d'être capable de reconnaître. Donc, d'où l'importance d'être guide dans ça pour ces enfants-là. There you go, Kimberly.
Thank you.
What I'm gathering, our French students talking about military families and what's classified as a military family, but it's all in French. So I'm not sure what's if they're going to do that in French first and then in English. Is my mic on?
It is, but what can we do to help?
Yes, exactly.
Shall we move on to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So thinking about the misconceptions that we have around children who are grieving, take a minute and think back to a time when you had a loss that was close to you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Think about the myriad of feelings that you had when you had that loss. And it doesn't have to be a death or a divorce or separation. It doesn't even have to be that big. It could be the loss of a job or the loss of a friend. It really is just about thinking about some of those feelings. You know, when we're talking about feelings, as grown-ups, we often have trouble labeling those feelings. So think about what it must be like to be 5 years old and trying to figure out that feeling of ambivalence, when really your vocabulary is happy, sad, hungry, angry. So one of the things that Rainbows does really well is we help give kids language to their feelings. Do we teach them to say ambivalent? No, but we do teach them kind of what those feelings are like, and that those feelings are really normal. Hélène?
On parle ici des émotions et du programme Rainbow, justement pour aider à faciliter les émotions pour les enfants. Quand on parle d'émotions, vous avez un grand choix et un grand vocabulaire comme adulte, comparativement à un enfant de 5 ans qui aurait quelques mots parce qu'ils apprennent à l'école à mettre les mots sur leurs émotions, mais les mots généraux comme content, triste, fâché, frustré et le mot non, bien sûr. Alors, le programme Rainbow aide et a un but d'aider à mettre les mots sur leurs émotions et de faire pression de ceci chez l'enfant et d'ouvrir l'opportunité et de préparer l'enfant à être capable d'entamer la discussion avec l'adulte, avec les mots de leurs émotions.
Can we have the next slide, please? One thing that we also know about loss is that it's rarely one loss. So if a family is separated, there is that loss of a parent, the access to that parent, immediate access to that parent. But then there may also be loss because now mom has to move to another community to go to work. And so there's a loss of connectivity to the peers, the peer network that they've established, their family or friends in the area, a change of dwelling, you know, a new home, a new school. All of those actually count as loss. So that's why when we talk about loss, no matter what that loss is, it's really never, it's always more than that one loss. So we have these feelings for one loss, but really we don't. We have feelings for all the losses that go along with that life-altering event. That's why we refer to it as a life-altering event. Hélène?
Quand on parle de perte, c'est jamais juste une perte et c'est comme ça pour tous les gens qui vivent la perte primaire. Donc, ce qu'on parle aussi, c'est que dès qu'il y a un événement dans la vie qui peut changer les choses face au deuil ou au divorce, qui encourt des pertes, des changements aussi de façon de fonctionner, ça change tout. Alors, un enfant peut vivre une perte et suite à une perte peut vivre un déménagement. Alors, c'est une perte de logement, une perte d'amis, parce qu'il faut recommencer à quelque part d'autre. Ça peut être juste même, si c'est un parent qui doit recommencer à travailler, c'est la perte d'avoir la présence à la maison. Donc, les pertes sont toujours associées avec d'autres pertes. Ce n'est seulement pas juste une chose qu'on a perdue, donc on doit faire le deuil.
Next slide, please. So how does Rainbows help? Next slide, please. We provide what we call a safe place for children to interact with each other and share their feelings and build relationships. We help the children, as I mentioned before, understand and identify with the feelings that they're feeling. We give them tools to use when those feelings become overwhelming, because we know that happens, and we provide them a network of support to turn to. A number of our programs happen where children congregate ordinarily. So in a school or a Boys and Girls Club, somewhere where there is already a group of children receiving support in that community. And the reason that that works so well is because when the Rainbows program isn't running, then they have someone that they can turn to on the playground or on the basketball court and say, this is what happened to me today, or this is how I'm feeling today. And they immediately have some support. They immediately have someone who understands what those feelings are like and can help them through the process. in one of the programs that I've helped facilitate, we had a little girl who came in the door of the class. It was in a school, and she came through the door of the classroom and said, last night my daddy told me he doesn't want to see me anymore. And immediately, the little girl across the table from her said, I remember when that happened to me. And all of a sudden, the stress that you could see on her body language when she walked through the door melted away, and she was able to sit down, and we were able to have a discussion about what had happened, how she was feeling about what had happened. So that's why we like to create those networks of support, so that there's something there when there's not a formal process in place to help support them. That's a lot, Hélène, but go ahead.
Alors, le programme Rainbow est un endroit où est-ce qu'on peut offrir un endroit sécuritaire, un endroit aussi fermé pour donner la place aux gens et aux enfants de bien être capables d'établir une relation positive, une relation ouverte, mais dans un milieu sécuritaire, donc où est-ce qu'ils peuvent tout être dit, mais sans être jugés et sans aussi que ça soit répété, dépendant si c'est pour la sécurité des enfants ou pas, mais si c'est juste pour parler de leurs émotions, c'est une place où est-ce que c'est fait. Alors, cet endroit-là qui est sécuritaire et ouvert et positif aide les enfants à comprendre leurs émotions. Ça leur donne aussi des outils pour être capables de naviguer les émotions, les sentiments dont ils vivent, et aussi ça donne un endroit où est-ce qu'ils créent une petite communauté à travers ces jeunes avec eux pour être capable de donner du support entre eux. L'exemple que Kimberly a donné, c'était que oui, quand les enfants des fois arrivent de leur fin de semaine, ils arrivent au groupe, ils ont toujours des nouvelles à dire, et souvent c'est des nouvelles qui peuvent être négatives, comme un enfant qui arrive et dit, ben moi, mon papa en fin de semaine, c'est ce qu'il m'a dit, il veut plus me voir. Et il devient stressé parce que c'est quelque chose qu'ils ne peuvent pas naviguer parce qu'ils n'ont pas justement la maturité émotionnelle de naviguer ces choses. Mais quand les autres enfants peuvent relater, donc relayer eux aussi que oui, ça pourrait arriver, que c'est arrivé à eux, ça tout de suite diminue le stress de l'enfant parce qu'il était capable de dire dans un endroit safe et sécuritaire. Et puis aussi, il était capable de se faire comprendre parce que les amis dans ce groupe ont été capables de lui dire, ben écoute, ça peut arriver. Et le facilitateur Rainbow peut être capable d'entamer la discussion pour justement diffuser, arrêter l'ampleur et en même temps donner les outils pour gérer ces choses. There you go, Kimberly.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So how do we do that? How does Rainbows actually help do all of these things that we've been talking about? And that's really through a number of programs that are divided by developmental age, approximately, because we certainly don't want to put a 4-year-old into a program with a 14-year-old. So we have a number of different programs to help support children and families. One of those being Sunbeams. That's a preschooler program, and it's really for the 3 to 5-year-old, depending on the 3 to 6-year-old, depending on the structure of the organization that we're partnering with. Rainbows can be run from 5 years of age up to grade 8, and it's divided into different levels according to development. Spectrum is our youth program, and that's for grades 9 to 12. Kaleidoscope is our program for adults who are coping with a loss, and it may be something that is recent, but it's most likely, and what we see most are adults who are dealing with loss from a long time ago. We have Kaleidoscope programs that we've offered for grandparents who are parenting their grandchildren, who have sole custody of their grandchildren. And we run Kaleidoscope programs in one of the prisons in British Columbia. PRISM is our single parent program. Again, it is about coping with loss, but it is more specific to single parents and blended families. We have a program we don't talk about very much, but it's a community crisis program. We've used a number of times here. It was developed originally to support the 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. And so it is kind of a natural disasters program just to help families sort through that. And it is, Silver Linings does a program for preschoolers up to adults. And Luminaries is grief program that's really targeted to special needs populations. All of our programs are mandated free to participants. There's small costs to organizations that do Rainbow's programs, but for universally for children who attend Rainbow's programs, there is no cost. Hélène?
Les programmes sont différents de l'âge de 3 ans à adulte, comme vous avez entendu. Alors, le premier, c'est pour les jeunes en préscolaire, donc 3-5 ans, Sunbeams. Le deuxième qui est très populaire, c'est le Rainbow, qui est justement la maternelle jusqu'à la 8e année. Le Spectrum, qui est de la 9e à la 12e année, donc le secondaire 1 à 5 pour certaines provinces, mais c'est de 9e à 12e pour différentes provinces aussi. Nous avons le Kaléidoscope qui est pour les adultes qui expériencent eux aussi le deuil, le divorce, les grandes pertes. Le programme PRISM est pour les parents seuls, donc les parents qui se sont divorcés. On a un programme aussi qu'on ne parle pas souvent qui est le Silver Lining, qui est pour des crises communautaires, comme si vous avez des inondations, des événements comme tremblements de terre, crises communautaires. Alors, c'est un programme pour nos jeunes qui est facilité. Et le Luminaries, qui est le programme Rainbow, mais pour la population à besoins spéciaux, donc du plus petit au plus grand. Ce sont des programmes qui sont gratuits et qui sont offerts par les centres Rainbow dans votre communauté.
Good. Next slide, please. So our goals for Rainbows as it impacts on the children is to develop and strengthen their problem-solving skills. And that's using those tools that we give the children to use when their feelings become overwhelming. One of the things we know is impacted by children who are struggling with loss of school attendance and academic performance. So our programs aim to improve that. They obviously to improve rates of depression and anxiety in children who've experienced a loss, and the emotional pain and suffering. So we want to reduce that as part of that, as part of the programs. Next slide, please. We want to improve communications within families. Grief happens at different times in different degrees for different individuals, and that doesn't matter if you're part of the family or not. And so what our goal is by offering Rainbows programs, especially in several different levels, is to try to help get the whole family, give them the tools that they need to kind of cope with their grief process. We want to prevent destructive behaviors because we know the research has shown a direct correlation between children who've experienced a loss and are struggling with that loss, with, as I mentioned before, depression, but also some of those higher risk behaviors like participation in gangs and substance and alcohol abuse and promiscuous activity are all actually directly linked through research to children who are really struggling through that loss. And we want to expose children to people that may not be in their regular peer group, but that are within their community who have a similar experience, so that they feel that they're not alone, because that's always something children turn to when that it's actually, I think we all do, is that sense that why is this happening to me? Why only me? And so by creating a network of support, they really do, like my example, understand that it isn't just you and that this is all part of the process. Hélène?
Can you go back to the first slide, please, so I don't miss anything? Alors, les impacts chez les enfants avec le programme Rainbow sont identifiés avec différents points. Un des points, c'est pour développer les capacités de résolution de problèmes avec les comportements appropriés et aussi, chez les enfants, bien être capable de gérer leur colère. Ça peut aider aussi les jeunes à être plus concentrés à l'école et aussi à être mieux équipés, enfin, d'outils pour être capable d'être à l'école et rester en focus, vu qu'ils ont atteint les outils pour être capables de bien gérer leur colère et leurs émotions. Ça peut aider justement directement avec pas être en dépression ou développer de l'anxiété parce qu'ils sont capables de reconnaître les signes, sont capables de mettre des mots sur leurs émotions. Ça réduit les émotions et aussi la souffrance. Next slide, please. C'est aussi aider la communication avec leur famille. Souvent, les jeunes, surtout les tout petits, qui n'ont pas les outils pour gérer leurs émotions, ont de la difficulté à communiquer. Et on sait très bien que si un enfant est capable d'amener aux parents, aux adultes autour d'eux, une communication plus claire, ça sollicite l'ouverture justement de la communication. Ça peut aider aussi avec les comportements à risque qu'on voit chez nos adolescents. On sait très bien qu'un adolescent qui vit un moment de perte dans leur vie, un changement, peut conduire à des comportements destructeurs qui sont les gangs de rue, l'alcool, les abus de substances. Et aussi, ça peut être aussi des comportements plus sévères, mais avec ce programme, ça peut donner un intérêt aux jeunes à comprendre et à justement faire des choix plus positifs. Et aussi, ça donne la chance aux enfants qui vivent un deuil, d'avoir des jeunes autour d'eux qui vivent la même chose, de se rencontrer, de reconnaître qu'il y a une communauté pour eux et que finalement, ils ne sont pas si différents que les autres. That's it.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a diagram about how this all works. So, we have Sunbeams, Rainbows, and Spectrum. They're all, you'll notice they all have a small number of participants. And the reason that we do that is that we want to establish a basis of trust within that group, because we want them to share the things that they wouldn't share with other people. They wouldn't necessarily share at home. And we really need to create a place of safe trust so that they'll share. And that's a little harder to do the bigger the group is. 1 to 2 facilitators really depends on what the organization's policies are around one staff and a group of children. All of our programs, although it says here 14 weeks, 14 weeks, 13 weeks, what we've done with Rainbows is made it slightly flexible so that there is a capacity to shorten that time period if it works better for our partner organizations. And I know in the schools here in Simcoe County in Ontario, they're running 10-week programs with a Celebrate Me Day at the end. And Celebrate Me Day is really just what it sounds like. It's about celebrating the success of their participation in the group. It's just a little celebration. Most of our programs run between 20 and 50 minutes long. Again, it really depends on how the program is being implemented with some of our partner organizations, but there is a flexibility there, but that still keeps it true to the pedagogy that it was designed on. Hélène?
Comme vous voyez sur cette image, le programme Rainbow est divisé en différents groupes d'âge et aussi le nombre de participants, c'est quand même très minime. Et la raison pourquoi nous avons un nombre de participants qui est assez petit, c'est pour justement donner l'espace et le temps aux participants d'être capables de s'exprimer dans un endroit sécuritaire et positif. Aussi, on peut utiliser 1 ou 2 facilitateurs dépendant de le contingent que vous avez. C'est étendu sur 14 semaines, mais c'est flexible parce que dans les 14 semaines, il y a 2 événements où c'est les événements de célébration pour moi. Alors, ça s'appelle plein feu. C'est sûr qu'on peut faire seulement 10 semaines et juste un plein feu à la fin, surtout si on est dans le calendrier scolaire. Moi-même, je l'utilise dans les calendriers scolaires pour le conseil scolaire où je travaille. Et puis, c'est ce qu'on fait. C'est qu'on fait 10 semaines et à la fin, on a une grande célébration au lieu de le faire sur 14 semaines. Ou si c'est le temps suggéré, alors c'est entre 20 et 50 minutes, 55 minutes, dépendant du groupe que vous avez. Souvent, encore une fois, dans le milieu scolaire, c'est le temps où on le fait pendant l'heure du dîner autour de la boîte à lunch, qui est un endroit, une opportunité aussi pour avoir un peu plus de temps. Et autour de la nourriture, c'est sûr que les cultures embarquent un peu plus. Mais il y a d'autres temps aussi qu'on peut le faire, mais entre 20 et 55 minutes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Can we get the next slide, please? Maybe no. Maybe no. One thing about rainbows is that it's very simple and straightforward and easy to implement. Next slide, please. The way that the curriculum is set up, there is a manual, and the manual is divided up into each weekly session by level of participation. So when you're facilitating a Rainbows program as a volunteer or as a staff member, you're going to the book, you're looking at what you need for this week. It tells you all of the books, all of the games, all of the creative supplies, what you're going to talk about to start conversations. Everything is there. And while the goal of the program is really to get the children involved with discussions with their peers. So a topic gets put to the group, and then the group participates so that we can generate discussion and generate that environment of, I'm not the only one. But the facilitator manual is set up in a way that makes it really simple and straightforward to use. And the program is set up to meet the children where they're at. So it's not a curriculum that you have to follow from week 1 to week 14. It's really about what's happening within the group on that particular week, and then that's the section of the program that you can go to help guide discussion around whatever is going on in the group. Does that make sense? Hélène?
Yes. Do you want me to do it in French now?
Yes, please.
L'implémentation de programme Rainbow est une implantation beaucoup simple et droit au but, facile à faire. C'est quelque chose qui est faisable dans tous les milieux. La façon dont ça fonctionne, c'est que il y a des manuels avec toutes clés en main. Avec chaque semaine, c'est comme une recette. Donc, à chaque semaine, vous avez les jeux que vous avez besoin, les livres que vous allez utiliser de votre équipement, des ressources, du sujet que vous allez parler, comment vous allez, le format, donc comment vous allez procéder pour cette classe. Donc, c'est comme dans un petit dossier, vous ouvrez la page et très simplement, c'est inscrit comme une recette. C'est facile à suivre. Tout est fait clé en main, donc vous avez les jeux, vous avez les ressources qui sont en français, dans notre cas, et en anglais pour ceux qui sont en anglais, avec chaque semaine un plan, et puis c'est fait pour être utilisé avec les enfants au niveau où ils sont et où est-ce qu'ils sont rendus dans les étapes. There you go.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So each child gets a journal, and there really is a basis of journaling that's set out throughout this curriculum to allow children to put down their thoughts and feelings even if they're not willing to share within the group. And we integrated a story of children that they can hopefully identify with at some point throughout the stories in each of the journal levels. So as I mentioned before, Rainbows is divided, that's our school age, that SK to grade 8 program. And that's really the program that we utilize the most across the country. We use them all, but this one seems to be the largest. So level 1 is for that 1st and 2nd grade, and it has its own name, Kid Connection. Level 2 is for 3rd and 4th grade. We call that Team Time. Level 3 is for 5th and 6th grade. We call it The Landing, and level 4 is for that grade 7 and 8, and we call that See You at Lunch. Your turn.
Chaque niveau a son propre nom et chaque programme qu'on utilise ont leur propre journal de bord. Le programme le plus utilisé, bien sûr, c'est celui du Rainbow. Alors, nous avons différents 4 niveaux à ce niveau-là, dépendant de l'âge des enfants et aussi des années scolaires. Donc, le niveau 1, qui est première, deuxième année, on l'appelle Kids Connection, la connexion des enfants. Le deuxième niveau, qui est pour les 3e et les 4e années, alors c'est le temps de l'équipe, Team Time. Le niveau 3, c'est pour les 5e, 6e années, qui s'appelle le Landing, alors l'atterrissage. Et bien sûr, celui qui est très en demande et aussi très populaire pour les jeunes, 7e et 8e année, niveau 4, See You at Lunch, on se voit au dîner. c'est les 4 niveaux qui sont les plus utilisés et les journaux de bord sont appropriés avec l'âge approprié, le niveau, pour être capable de bien capter l'intérêt des jeunes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So just to have a brief look at our journals, well, we've been doing this for 30-ish years. We've updated our curriculum materials along the way, as you would expect. And 2 years ago, we released these new journals. These are the copies of the ones that we were just talking about in the last slide for our Rainbows level program. And we'll have to look at each level of those materials. But I know that because Rainbows has been around for a while, you may be not familiar with the new materials. And I have someone who is working on translating them into French, and so hopefully we'll be able to have those ready later this fall. Yay!
Les livres que vous voyez sont les livres pour la collection en anglais. La collection en anglais, donc bien sûr, nous les francophones, on a encore la vieille version, mais ils sont aussi colorés et aussi intéressants. Kimberly vient de mentionner que justement, ça fait 2 ans que la nouvelle collection elle est sortie et ils sont juste prêts bientôt, en octobre, pour sortir la collection en français. Mais il y a des journaux de bord qui ont les mêmes idéologies en français, c'est juste pas les mêmes images.
Okay, next slide, please. So Spectrum is our youth-based program, and there are 2 levels for younger teens in that, 14 to 16, and then 17 and 18 for the older Spectrum group. And they're available actually all of our material is available in a religious or a secular version. Most of our programs are actually secular. Your turn.
Tous les programmes de Rainbow de 3 ans à 18 ans sont disponibles dans 2 versions, donc la version non dimensionnelle et la version religieuse, bien sûr. On utilise beaucoup le non dimensionnel avec toutes les cultures maintenant qu'on a. Ce qu'on vous présente présentement, c'est le programme Spectrum pour les adolescents, 14 à 18 ans. Donc, c'est un petit peu plus, avec l'aspect un peu plus vieux, aussi avec une allure un petit peu plus cool pour les jeunes.
Thank you.
There you go.
Next slide. These are adult programs that we spoke about earlier. So Kaleidoscope is for that adult who's experiencing or experienced a loss, and PRISM is that single parent or step family program. You're up.
Vous avez les 2 programmes pour les adultes qu'on a parlé tantôt. Alors, Kaleidoscope, qui est pour les adultes avec l'expérience du deuil, le divorce et tout ça. Et vous avez le PRISM, qui est pour les adultes qui sont seuls, donc qui sont passés après la tempête, et aussi les familles reconstituées.
Right there. Thank you. So, as I mentioned before, this curriculum has been developed based on a pedagogy. And in 2006, I believe, an empirical study was done by Rainbows International, and they looked at how effective the Rainbows program was. And here are some of the outcomes. This is what they found. The children felt that they were less alone. They felt that their group cared more about them and their feelings, and that they learned new ways of solving problems. From the parents' perspective, the children didn't seem to feel that the loss was their fault anymore. We know that's very frequently a concern of children, where the thought that the children understood that this loss thing is a process that we have to go through. It's not going to just get fixed. The relationship between the parent and the child improved, and which is reasonable because children are physical mourners. Their grief behavior is really physical, and so the relationship can be strained, and Rainbows has worked to help to improve that. And then we've helped bolster the child's self-esteem. Your turn.
Alors, la recherche nous démontre que l'Université d'Illinois fait une recherche sur le programme Rainbow. Et voici les statistiques que ça nous donne. On n'a pas de chiffres, mais juste au moins les données. Donc, les enfants se sentent moins seuls. Ils se sentent dans un groupe où est-ce que justement ils peuvent être écoutés, entendus et que c'est positif. Ils apprennent une façon avec des outils pour résoudre leurs problèmes. Les parents des enfants de Rainbow se sentaient plus près et que les enfants étaient compris et qui comprenaient le processus de la perte, que les enfants ne se sentaient plus seuls et que ce n'est pas de leur faute parce que souvent un enfant va prendre toute la responsabilité sur eux. Elle aide aussi à la relation avec leurs enfants, donc c'est-à-dire que ça peut ouvrir la communication. Les enfants aussi, avec leur comportement, peut-être être capable de mettre les mots sur les émotions, fait que l'enfant est moins agité. Et aussi, ça l'aide l'estime de soi chez l'enfant à comprendre la réassurance, que ce n'est pas de leur faute, à savoir qu'il y a des étapes dans le deuil ou la perte, et puis qu'à la fin de la journée, il y a une lumière au bout du tunnel.
Thank you. Next, oh, she beat me to it this time.
Oh.
So why rainbows? Next slide, please. I mean, really, why this webinar? It's really about talking about the connection between challenges and supports for our military families and the connection to rainbows in my mind. So if we look at how the needs of military families, and I am not a military families expert, that's you folks, but I can see some quick wins. So this is from my perspective. I'm sure you have more that you can add to these slides, so please feel free to contribute or ask me questions. Military families moving 2 to 5 years, every 2 to 5 years. That when there's moving, there's a disconnection from friends and family. There's a loss of established peer support network. There's disruption to school. There may be a parent who is living in the house with a mental or physical injury. And all of those things would make everyday life harder, never mind adding some additional losses onto all of those unique features of a military family. Go ahead, Hélène.
Le programme Rainbow pourrait être un bon programme pour les familles militaires. C'est sûr que les familles militaires vivent une logistique très différente que les familles civiles. Pour l'instant, nous savons que les familles militaires sont portées à déménager à tous les 2 à 5 années. Donc, ce que cela amène une disconnexion. Donc, vous êtes enlevé de vos racines entre les amis, la famille et tout le réseau social que les familles construisent autour d'eux pour être capables de vivre. Alors, ça enlève aussi un moment de sécurité chez les enfants et chez les adultes. Aussi, le changement d'école peut amener l'anxiété chez les enfants. Donc, encore là, il y a un grand besoin. Et puis, souvent, famille militaire peut vivre avec un parent qui a un problème de santé mentale ou qui vit aussi avec un diagnostic de santé mentale ou physiquement blessé. Alors, on sait que pour les familles militaires qui ont des adolescents, ça peut être difficile et ça peut amener l'élément d'être à risque à des comportements un petit peu plus dangereux, vu tous les défis que ça amène d'être une famille militaire. There you go.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we know that research supports some of the challenges that children in military families are. Some of these are outlined in a study that I understand is kind of universally looked at from your sector, and that's Bullock and Sokomrovsky. I probably didn't say that right, but so these were some of the points in those studies, so that there was a small but significant association between deployment and a child's increased internalization, externalization, and academic problems. That changes in performance, flashing out, worrying, high emotions, disrespecting parents, authorities, feeling a sense of loss and symptoms consistent with depression. And some of those are examples of what I was speaking about before, about children being physical mourners, about them acting out those feelings. Deployment has an impact on child's well-being, routines, family dynamics, all of those change. And I think that that's fairly universal for any life-altering event, any child experiencing a life-altering event. And the research has shown that actively looking for support is actually a great protective factor from stresses associated with military life. Go ahead, Helen.
Les recherches démontrent, et il y a eu une recherche qui a été faite spécifiquement pour les familles militaires, qui souvent, il y a un lien entre les déploiements et les changements chez les enfants, de leur comportement interne et externe et aussi de leur succès académique. Souvent, l'école, la performance à l'école, le temps d'être à l'école, comment gérer la colère, le niveau d'anxiété et aussi d'être internaliser les émotions et souvent être disrespectueux envers la famille autoritaire. Donc, si c'est la maman qui est à la maison envers la mère, ou si c'est le père, c'est le père. Il y a un sentiment aussi de perte, parce qu'il y a un changement constant. Et puis, les symptômes d'une dépression légère peuvent être souvent présents pendant ce temps-là, parce que ça change la routine de vie, ça change la façon que la famille elle est gérée, la dynamique de la famille. Donc, l'impact du déploiement peut avoir quand même beaucoup d'effets sur la famille restante. L'importance d'avoir un réseau social autour peut aider ces facteurs pour éliminer ou en tout cas réduire le niveau de stress que peut vous donner avec le programme Rainbow.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So here's how I see the fit. Rainbows utilizes a broad definition of loss. Many programs who help support children help support them in a specific area: loss from death through cancer, loss from heart disease, and they deal with that one specific thing. But the truth is, as we talked about earlier, it's not really ever one loss. It's always multiple losses. So it's loss on loss on loss. And so you want to be able to give children the support through all of those losses. Look at the feelings from all of those losses and how they're impacting on the child. So Rainbows looks at every kind of loss. Any kind of loss that would identify, that a child would identify as being something that they are having trouble dealing with those feelings. So separation, divorce, death, deployment, not necessarily related to this webinar, but incarceration, hospitalization for mental illness or addictions. And we also have worked with wards of the Crown who have been, who have the sense of abandonment. And so we look at a broader scope, and I think we can support children through a broader scope of life experience. And the program doesn't focus on why you're there. It doesn't talk about the life event necessarily. Does it come up in conversation? Yes, absolutely. But the program really focuses on feelings because feelings are universal. So, you know, sad is sad is sad. It doesn't matter how you got sad. It does, but from a feelings perspective, it's sad. From a feelings perspective, angry is angry is angry. So we help kids deal with those feelings, give labels to the ones that they may not understand the feelings or the intensity with which they're feeling those feelings. Our programs are designed to create a safe space. We've talked about that a little bit before because we want children to share their deepest, darkest feelings. I worked with a group of children who were siblings of pediatric cancer patients. And one little girl said in the group, "I just wish my sister would die." Did she really feel that? No, but she did want her life to go back to normal. And there was no way she would share that with anyone in her family because she was embarrassed by that feeling. But we were able to get that feeling out and talk a little bit about what that frustration level must feel like. So we really want to create a safe, consistent space with a safe, consistent adult, caring adult to run the group in order to allow children to get those feelings out. Rainbow's programs help children who are going through a number of life-altering events. We've already talked about that quite a few times. And we want to create that network so that they have someone to go to on the playground or in their school that's not in their class, so that they always have a place to turn when they're having a really rough day. The other nice thing about children in our Rainbows programs is that they can come and take a Rainbows program and then they can come back. There is no limit on how long they can stay in the Rainbows program. They will only ever want to stay as long as it's helping them. When it stops feeling comfortable, then that's usually when they don't want to come. And they can come back as their development changes and as their life circumstances change. You know, we think about adults who have lost a parent and then get married, and that parent is missing, and then there's this sense of loss around something that's supposed to be a very happy time. Those kinds of life benchmarks happen to children too, you know, graduating from elementary school and first day of high school, or your first prom, or another life event, even a move that brings back memories of those loss. So children can come back to Rainbows time and time again and get that support for those feelings that they're feeling. Does every child come back? No, not every child needs to. But if they do, it's there. Because the other thing about children and grief is that their grief changes with their development. If they're very young, they have one understanding of that loss. And as their cognitive development starts to change, then they start to understand things differently. In the same group of children I was talking about earlier, one of the little boys had been a participant in his brother's funeral, knew everything that was happening to his level, and then 2 or 3 years later, he was sitting watching Raiders of the Lost Ark with his dad, and the skeletons started to come up out of the ground. And he turned to his father and said, "Is that what's happening to my brother?" And so it set off this whole other event of loss just because his understanding of what his experience was had changed to a point where he needed some more support through that loss. Sorry, Helene, this is going to be a hard one.
No, that's fine.
And then Rainbows is available in both official languages, which makes, I think, it available to as many people as we can. I'd love to have it in more languages. Go ahead, Helene.
So, the Fits for Rainbow, mais là, je vais parler en français, je m'excuse. Alors, l'adaptabilité de Rainbow pour le programme, pour votre communauté, le focus est sur la perte. Et la perte et les émotions. Et le focus n'est pas sur comment on est arrivé à une perte, les événements qui ont fait qu'on a des sentiments de tristesse. Ça va venir dans la conversation, mais ce n'est pas le but du groupe Rainbow. Le groupe Rainbow est vraiment pour créer un espace sécuritaire, positif, pour être capable pour que les enfants soient capables de partager leurs émotions, mettre les mots sur comment ils se sentent et aussi d'expliquer qu'est-ce qu'ils vivent et en même temps pour être capable de créer ce lien avec les enfants autour d'eux et les adultes parce que souvent ce qui arrive c'est qu'ils n'ont pas l'opportunité à l'extérieur, soit que c'est dans la vie de tous les jours à l'école ou avec les adultes où ils vivent, de le faire. Donc c'est vraiment un endroit de partage et de facilitation des émotions. Le programme Rainbow aide les enfants à être capables de passer au travers toutes les étapes et tous les événements qui ont amené à la perte ou au changement de leur vie, tout en avoir le sentiment de support et aussi d'être capable d'être en sécurité pour parler. La création d'un lien collaborateur avec d'autres enfants autour d'eux qui ont partagé l'expérience aide aussi à construire le sentiment d'appartenance, la relation pour l'enfant et être capable aussi de vivre bien les émotions. Les enfants peuvent participer au programme Rainbow plusieurs fois pendant leur temps de vie. Donc, ils peuvent y arriver au début parce qu'ils ont une perte et ensuite être capables de continuer tant et aussi longtemps qu'ils en ont besoin. On a des enfants qui le font 3 à 4 fois, donc 3 à 4 années en ligne à chaque fois qu'il y a une session de 12 semaines pour être capable de passer au travers. Et à chaque fois qu'ils reviennent, ils sont à un autre niveau dans leur élément de perte, dans leur deuil, ce qui fait que c'est très, très agréable et ça leur donne vraiment un sentiment de compréhension, de sécurité et aussi un endroit où ils peuvent partager. Souvent, ce qui arrive pendant leur cheminement, c'est qu'ils sont capables aussi d'avoir les conversations pendant que les mois passent avec les adultes autour d'eux et de faire les liens entre les événements qui sont arrivés et les événements de la vie. Donc, ça devient très intéressant et aussi gratifiant pour les enfants d'être capables de passer au travers ces changements-là et d'avoir une ouverture et une porte ouverte pour eux et de savoir qu'ils peuvent retourner. Donc, c'est pas après 10 semaines, c'est fini, tu as fait ton tour et c'est fini. Alors ça, c'est la porte ouverte sécuritaire est un élément très positif de Rainbow. Bien sûr, Rainbow, c'est en français et en anglais pour être capable justement de faciliter et d'ouvrir l'opportunité pour tout le monde. There you go.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So we've talked a little bit about these before. You know, Rainbow's programs provide an opportunity for children to have access to timely, meaningful support when they need it and where they need it. I'm not sure about other provinces, but here in Ontario specifically, wait lists for clinical supports for children are 6 to 9 months in length. The nice thing about Rainbows, although it's not a replacement for any kind of clinical support, it is something that can be an add-on. It is something that can help children cope in the interim, or can be participated in alongside of more clinical support. So we can give children access to support programs when they need it, not 6 or 9 months down the road. The programs, as I talked about before, are flexible, so it's really about being able to adjust to whatever works well in your community or in your organization, because what works well in Toronto doesn't necessarily work well in Yellowknife. So there needs to be some flexibility to make this more of a universal program, and Rainbows does have that capacity. So, you know, really in short, I think that there are some synergies between the needs of military families and some of the things that are unique to them and some of the things that are universal to families. We can help support with Rainbow's programs. Your turn, Hélène.
Le programme Rainbow, comme on l'a dit plus tôt, c'est une opportunité pour les enfants d'avoir accès sans limite à un support pour faciliter leur émotion tant et aussi longtemps qu'ils en ont besoin. C'est un programme qui a une flexibilité puis qui donne la chance à chaque site Rainbow de donner un programme. C'est un programme qui est approprié aux besoins de la communauté et des enfants de cette communauté. Donc, pour votre cas, pour les familles militaires, donc c'est un programme qui va être adapté pour votre réalité à vous. Vous savez, comme Kimberly disait, en Ontario, pour avoir un support clinique de professionnels, ça peut prendre plusieurs semaines. C'est à peu près partout dans la province. C'est sûr que le programme Rainbow, c'est un programme de facilitation des émotions. Ce n'est pas un programme à but thérapeutique, mais bien à but facilitation émotionnelle, mais qui peut nous aider justement à reconnaître et envoyer ensuite et faire la référence pour un service plus spécialisé. Les programmes Rainbow sont faits pour répondre à différents types de familles comme les vôtres, la famille militaire, un programme unique pour vous.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have. Comments are welcome to, because we've run really quickly through the slides, and I want to see if there's any questions that you folks may have.
Oh yeah, no, if you're gonna pull them at the same time.
Any questions, folks?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, this is Karen. I'm from the MFRC in Kingston.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, we run similar
type.
type.
I'm on board of directors. I've known Mandy. I'm Madeline's mom. Yeah.
Sorry, there's another conversation happening. Sorry, it
Yeah.
distracted me. So we run a number of similar programs here that aim at the same things, and I'm wondering, we find a high percentage of the children that are attending have some form of special needs,
Yes.
a lot of autism, and I'm wondering if the program is adaptable for those children.
That's what our Luminaries program is for, are for children with special needs, whether it's developmental or on the spectrum. That's what they're for.
Okay, perfect. So a child without a diagnosis is get as much out of it as a child that maybe is autistic.
Yeah, we would want to keep the groups for Luminaries smaller, obviously, because there are higher needs, but yes, there is the capacity there's a lot of activities that go along with the curriculum. It's not just the book. So there are games and storybooks and things, and depending on their coping strategies, it would allow enough flexibility to address those particular needs of a particular child. So I had a little boy with autism in a group that I was running, and he liked the board games. And so instead of using books and things, we centered that group around the board game, and then we would run the curriculum around playing the board game because it gave him an activity to do while he was having discussions. And of course, because his hands were busy, that was his need. He was able to have some actually very philosophical discussions with the group. So I hope that answers your question.
So I just want to clarify. So you could do the Luminaries program, but include children that were, I'm doing quotations here, but your average child with children with special needs, or would you do just a group of children with special needs with the Luminaries program?
You could do it both ways, and so it would really depend on the children that you were putting in the group.
Okay.
And you know those children best, or your staff or volunteers know those children best. So I would work with that group in order to set up that support group for that Rainbows group. So, so if the needs of the child were higher, then you could use the Luminaries. But if the needs of the group as a whole were more in that, average functioning, then you may want to start with the actual Rainbows program and then use some of the tools from Luminaries in that group.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
And we could work together on that. So anytime there's a special circumstance, there's someone in this office that can help to try to, that's when I talked about the flexibility. There's somebody here who can help you kind of create what makes most sense for your community.
Awesome. Perfect. I'm sorry, I have one more question. It's more on a personal level because we wouldn't necessarily be offering the adult program, but the Kaleidoscope program that is for adults with a loss, do you divide the groups by the type of loss?
No, not generally.
No, so it could have people in it that have lost a parent as well as people who have lost a child.
Absolutely. Because even the adult programs are based on feelings. And so they're, from a feelings perspective, there's no difference in that loss. Like, sad is sad and angry is angry. So that's how we're able to put everybody together in the same group. And what they start to find is that there is more similarity to their experience from a feelings perspective. And there is some group cohesion that comes out of that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anybody else?
Yes, it's Teresa from Borden.
Hi, Teresa.
Hello. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how we go about getting some of our staff trained to be facilitators for the program. Is there regular sessions offered? Is there something coming up in certain areas?
We're running training programs kind of everywhere and at different times, but maybe that's something that we can connect with after the webinar, if that would work for you.
Okay, for sure.
I know that that we were kind of hoping to be able to get groups of folks together to do some training for some of the MFRS folks from across the country. So I will give you my email address, and if you can send me an email, that would be great. And then I can connect back with the folks who were developing this webinar, and maybe we can get something strategically set up. So for anyone who's interested in contacting me, and I realized as we started this, I probably should have put my email up on the last slide, but anyway, it's not difficult. It's Kimberly, KIMBERLY, at rainbows, that's plural, .ca.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so anybody who's got additional questions or anything, please send it to me. We love to hear from folks across the country, and we'd love to help get some Rainbows programs out there for more children. Any other questions? And I understand too that all the presentation slides and the contact information will be shared with the group. All right, everyone, if there's no more questions, thank you so much for joining us today. Oh, did I cut somebody off? No. Thank you so much for joining us today and for putting up with me for an hour. And hopefully we'll get a chance to speak together soon. Everyone have a great sunny, well, it's sunny here in Ontario, not sure about where everywhere else, but I hope it's sunny everywhere else. Have a great day, folks.